The Empress of the Velorian Dominion recoiled the moment the human delegation entered her throne room, and every noble present held their breath. Her silver eyes widened, her elegant nostrils flared, and for one horrifying moment, Ambassador Kira then Varys thought her radiance might actually vomit on the crystalline floor. "Remove them," Empress Seelith commanded, her voice tight with barely controlled revulsion. "Remove them immediately." Marcus Cole stood motionless among his fellow humans, understanding exactly what was happening, even as the other diplomats looked around in confusion. He'd read the classified xenobiology reports. To the Velorians, whose entire social structure revolved around scent-based communication, humans smelled like rotting flesh. Like death itself walking. The Imperial Guard advanced, their ceremonial spears lowered. "Wait." The word came not from the Empress, but from the figure standing 3 steps below her throne. Princess Aethyra, heir apparent, raised one slender hand. "This is a formal diplomatic reception. To expel them without cause would violate the concordat of first contact." "The cause is evident," hissed Lord Vanthros, the Empress's chief advisor. His pale blue skin had taken on a greenish tinge. "They are offensive to our very nature. Their presence here is an insult." "Their presence here," Aethyra replied coolly, "was requested by this court. We invited them. We cannot now claim offense at their acceptance." Marcus watched the princess descend the remaining steps, her flowing robes trailing behind her like liquid silver. She was beautiful in the way that all Velorians were beautiful. Tall, willowy, with skin that shifted between shades of pearl and azure depending on the light. But there was something else in her bearing. Something weary. She stopped 10 feet from the human delegation, close enough that Marcus could see her fighting the instinct to cover her face. "Ambassador then Varys," she said, addressing the senior diplomat. "I apologize for this reception. You will be escorted to the guest quarters in the Eastern Wing. There are atmospheric filters there that may not ease the difficulty." "Your Highness is most gracious," then Varys replied with a diplomatic bow, though his jaw was tight with humiliation. As the delegation turned to leave, Marcus lingered. He'd been brought as a cultural attaché, a junior position, supposedly because of his expertise in xenoanthropology. In truth, he suspected command wanted at least one person on this mission who understood that first contact rarely went smoothly. The princess's gaze found him. For a moment, their eyes met, and he saw something flicker in those silver depths. Not disgust. Something closer to curiosity. "You are not leaving with the others," she observed. "I was wondering, Your Highness, if there might be any way to address the scent issue directly. Perhaps a neutralizing compound. Or you think we have not tried?" Lord Vanthros interrupted with a sneer. "You think in all the centuries of our civilization, we never developed such things? Human arrogance truly knows no bounds." "Lord Vanthros," Aethyra said quietly, and though her voice was soft, it carried the weight of absolute authority. "You forget yourself." The noble's face twisted, but he bowed and retreated. Aethyra turned back to Marcus. "The neutralizers exist. Human. They function perfectly well with other species. With your kind," she hesitated. "Your scent is unique. It penetrates everything. Even now, even with the filters running at maximum, I can taste it in the back of my throat. Death, decay, ending." "I'm sorry," Marcus said simply. Something shifted in her expression. "Most of your kind become defensive when told this. They insist we are wrong, or exaggerating, or being deliberately offensive. Would that change the truth of your experience?" The princess was silent for a long moment. Then, so quietly that he almost didn't hear her, "You should go, human. The Eastern Wing is prepared. Tomorrow, we will attempt the formal negotiations through sealed chambers and communication screens. It is the best we can offer." Marcus bowed in the Velorian fashion, deeper than a human bow, with the hand pressed to the throat to symbolize offering one's breath. He practiced it for weeks, knowing how important breath and scent were to their culture. Aethyra's eyes widened slightly. "You studied our customs. I tried, Your Highness. I wanted to understand. Understanding will not change what you are." "No," Marcus agreed, "but it might change how I walk through your world. And perhaps in time how your world sees mine." He left her standing there, and if he'd looked back, he might have seen the princess press her hand to her throat in an unconscious mirror of his gesture. The Eastern Wing was beautiful and isolated, a gilded cage filled with artificial air that stripped away all scent, including, Marcus realized with grim humor, the Velorians' primary form of emotional expression. The humans were functionally blind here, unable to read their hosts at all. Ambassador then Varys gathered the team that evening, his face pale with controlled fury. "This mission is a disaster. We've been here 6 hours, and already we've been publicly humiliated, segregated, and treated like diseased animals. The princess advocated for us, offered Dr. Chen, the team's xenobiologist. That has to count for something. The princess was performing duty, Deveris replied. Nothing more. I've sent a preliminary report to command. I expect we'll be recalled within the week. Marcus said nothing. He was thinking about the way Aethyra had looked at him, not with the visceral disgust of the Empress or the sneering contempt of Lord Vanthros, but with something more complex. Weariness, loneliness, and yes, curiosity. He was thinking about the reports he'd read, the ones classified above his pay grade that he'd accessed anyway. The ones that said the Velorian princess had been promised to 7 different noble houses over the past decade, and had somehow managed to refuse or escape every match. The ones that said she was considered damaged by her own people, too cold, too cerebral, unable to form proper scent bonds. He was thinking about what it might mean to be incapable of connection, in a society where connection was everything. 3 days passed. The negotiations proceeded through screens and speakers, stilted and formal. The humans offered trade routes, technology, military cooperation. The Velorians listened politely and offered nothing in return. On the 4th day, Marcus received a summons. Princess Aethyra would receive him in the Winter Garden. Alone. This is highly irregular, Denvaris protested. A private audience with junior staff. It's either a deliberate slight or a trap. Or she's curious, Marcus said. About what? Marcus didn't answer. He simply straightened his formal jacket and walked out. The Winter Garden was a contradiction. A space filled with ice sculptures and frozen waterfalls, yet somehow warmer than anywhere else Marcus had been in the palace. He realized after a moment that the warmth was real. Heat sources were hidden throughout the space, creating a microclimate that existed in defiance of its frozen aesthetics. The princess was waiting beside a crystalline tree, her robes today a deep violet that made her skin seem almost luminescent. She was alone, without guards or attendants. You came quickly, she observed. You asked, I summoned. That is different. Is it? Marcus walked closer, stopping at what he judged to be a respectful distance. You could have commanded my attendance through official channels. Instead, you sent a personal invitation on palace stationery. That suggests asking, not summoning. Aethyra's head tilted slightly, a Velorian expression of surprise, he knew from his studies. You read intention into paper weight and word choice, I read what I can. In the absence of your people's gifts, humans must learn to interpret other signals. Your people's gifts, she repeated, an interesting phrase. Most humans I have encountered speak of our sensitivities as a weakness. Something primitive. They pride themselves on having evolved beyond such dependence on biological signals. Those humans sound like idiots. The princess made a sound that might have been laughter, quickly suppressed. You are not what I expected. What did you expect? I do not know. She turned away, walking deeper into the garden. After a moment's hesitation, Marcus followed. When my mother first proposed this diplomatic outreach, I opposed it. I had read the reports. I knew what humans were, aggressive, short-lived, driven by chemical impulses they barely understand. I knew how you would smell to us. I thought. She paused beside an ice sculpture of something with too many wings. I thought nothing good could come from contact with your kind. And now? Aethyra faced him. They were close now, closer than they'd been in the throne room. He could see the delicate patterns in her skin, the way it shifted and swirled like living opal. He could see too the faint lines at the corners of her eyes. Stress, he realized. Exhaustion. Now I find myself wondering why you do not smell like death to me. Marcus went very still. Your colleagues, the princess continued, smell exactly as the reports described. Decay and endings. Even through the filters, even at a distance. But you? She stepped closer, and Marcus felt his heart rate spike. You are different. I don't understand. Neither do I. She was close enough now that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Velorians ran hot, he remembered. Several degrees above human, normal duality. When you entered the throne room, I noticed it immediately. The others made my eyes water and my stomach turn, but you... She leaned in, and for a wild moment, Marcus thought she was going to kiss him. Instead, she inhaled, a long, slow breath, her eyes drifting closed. When she opened them again, there was something new in her expression. Something vulnerable. You smell like home, she said quietly. I do not understand it. I do not even know what home should smell like. I have never felt truly at ease anywhere in my life. But when I breathe you in... She trailed off, looking almost frightened. Your Highness, Aethyra. The word was barely a whisper. When we are alone, you may call me Aethyra. Marcus swallowed hard. Aethyra. I don't know why I'm different. I don't know what this means. But I know that I'm glad, more glad than I can express, that I don't cause you pain. The princess was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she extended her hand. Marcus took it. Her skin was warm and smooth, her grip surprisingly strong. They stood there in the frozen garden, hand in hand, while ice sculptures glittered around them, and something vast and unnamed hung in the air between them. This is unprecedented, Aethyra said finally. In all our records, in all our history, there has never been an exception. No human has ever been tolerable to Velorian senses, let alone. She stopped, seeming unable to find the words. I'm honored to be unprecedented. That almost laugh again. You are also impertinent, I've been told. Aethyra released his hand, but slowly, almost reluctantly. I will need to study this. Understand it. My mother cannot know, not yet. She would. A shadow crossed her face. She would find a way to use it. Or destroy it. What do you want me to do? The princess looked at him with those silver eyes, and for the first time, Marcus saw something like hope in their depths. Come back tomorrow, she said. Tell no one, and let me learn what you are. For 3 weeks, Marcus kept the secret. Every day, while his colleagues conducted their futile negotiations through screens, he slipped away to the winter garden. Every day, Aethyra was waiting. Sometimes they talked for hours, about human culture, Velorian history, the vast gulf of understanding between their species. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence while the ice sculptures caught the light. And every day, the princess leaned a little closer when she inhaled his scent. I've been researching, she told him on the 15th day. They were sitting on a bench, carved from solid crystal, watching a fountain of liquid nitrogen cascade into a frozen pool. Your biology, looking for anomalies, find anything? Nothing obvious. You are within normal human parameters. Blood chemistry, hormonal profile, genetic markers, all unremarkable. She hesitated. There's one thing. Yes, your medical records mention a traumatic event. 3 years ago. A colony ship called the Perseverance. Marcus's voice came out flat. You shouldn't have accessed those records. I am heir to the Dominion. I can access anything. But there was no arrogance in her tone. Only concern. What happened on that ship? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He'd never spoken about it. Not to the therapist Command had mandated. Not to his family. Not to anyone. The official reports told the story in cold clinical terms. Mechanical failure, hull breach, 47 dead out of a crew of 60. Marcus Cole, sole survivor of Deck 7. There was an accident, he said finally. A cascade failure in the life support systems. My deck, we were sealed off from the rest of the ship. No one could reach us. How long? 17 days. Aethyra's breath caught. 17 days without life support? Not without. We had minimal atmosphere, minimal heat. Enough to survive, if we rationed carefully. He stared at the frozen fountain, but he wasn't seeing ice. He was seeing faces. There were 12 of us at first. A family with children, some engineers, a medic. By day 5, the children were gone. The cold took them while they slept. He felt Aethyra's hand on his arm, but he couldn't stop now. The words were flowing out like water from a breached dam. By day 10, only 3 of us were left. Me, the medic, and an engineer named Yusuf. The medic had some kind of sedative in his kit, emergency supplies. He suggested we use it. Go to sleep, and not wake up. Better than freezing to death slowly. But he refused. Yusuf took the offer. The medic gave him the injection, then himself. I watched them close their eyes, and Marcus's voice cracked. I sat there with their bodies for 7 more days, talking to them, telling them they weren't alone, making sure they were covered, that the cold didn't take their dignity. The rescue report said you were found barely conscious. Hypothermic. Die. They thought you were dead. I nearly was. But I couldn't let go. I kept thinking about Yusuf's daughter. She was back on Earth, waiting for her father to come home. I kept thinking that someone had to survive to tell her what happened. To tell her that her father was brave, that he made a choice, that he wasn't alone at the end. Marcus turned to look at Aethyra. Her silver eyes were bright with something that might have been tears, though Velorians didn't cry the way humans did. I'm telling you this because you asked, but also because... He struggled for words. I spent 17 days surrounded by death. Breathing death. Living with it. Maybe that changed something in me. Maybe death became familiar enough that it no longer reads as hostile. You think that is why you smell different to me? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. But I know that I came out of that ship as something other than what I went in. And maybe that's why you can breathe me without pain. Aethyra was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, she leaned her head against his shoulder. I am sorry for what you suffered, she said. But I am not sorry it made you who you are. Marcus didn't respond. He just sat there, feeling her warmth against his side, and wondered when exactly he had started falling in love with an alien princess. The test came 3 days later. Lord Vanthros had been watching. Of course he had. A man with that much contempt was always watching, waiting for evidence of wrongdoing. He cornered Marcus in a corridor outside the filtered zone, where the princess's presence would be strongest on his clothes and skin. Human ... The word dripped with disdain. You have been meeting with Her Highness. Marcus didn't bother denying it. The princess has been helping me understand Velorian culture. Research for the diplomatic mission. Research. Vanthros circled him like a predator. Is that what you call it? Contaminating our air with your death stench? Filling her head with your primitive philosophies? I think Her Highness is more than capable of deciding who she speaks with. Her Highness is sheltered, naive, in matters of alien deception. She does not see what you are doing. Marcus stood very still. And what am I doing, Lord Vanthros? Seducing her. Manipulating her. Using whatever foul trick allows you to mask your true nature to worm your way into her confidence. The noble leaned close enough that Marcus could smell his perfume, a complex blend designed to communicate aggression and dominance. I know what you are, human. A social climber, a parasite. You think if you can claim the princess, you will elevate your entire mongrel species. I think, Marcus said quietly, that you're afraid. Vanthros went rigid. I think the princess doesn't fit into your neat social hierarchy. She can't form scent bonds, can't be traded like currency between noble houses. She's an anomaly, and anomalies are dangerous. So you've spent years trying to isolate her, to make her feel broken and wrong, hoping she'd eventually accept whatever match you arranged out of sheer desperation. Marcus stepped forward, and for all that Vanthros was taller, broader, older, the noble took an involuntary step back. And now a human walks in, the lowest of the low, a walking corpse by your standards, and she actually wants to spend time with him. That terrifies you. Because if she can find connection with something as disgusting as me, then all your careful manipulation means nothing. You understand nothing of our ways, human. Maybe not. But I understand loneliness. I understand what it does to a person when everyone around them treats them as defective. And I understand that Aethyra deserves better than to be used as a bargaining chip by people who can't see past her difference. Vanthros' face twisted with rage. You dare speak her name? She gave me permission. For a moment, Marcus thought the noble would strike him. Then, slowly, Vanthros' expression smoothed into something far more dangerous. Cold calculation. Enjoy your little romance while it lasts, human. The Empress will learn of this. And when she does, no amount of diplomatic immunity will protect you from what comes next. He swept away, leaving Marcus alone in the corridor. That night, Marcus told Aethyra everything. She listened without interruption, her face unreadable. When he finished, she was quiet for so long that he began to fear the worst. You defended me, she said finally. Of course I did. Why? The question seemed to genuinely puzzle her. Marcus reached out, taking her hand the way he had that first day in the garden. Because you matter to me. Because what Vanthros said was cruel and wrong. Because He hesitated, then pushed forward. Because I care about you, Aethyra. Not as a diplomatic opportunity. Not as a curiosity. As a person. Her fingers tightened around his. No one has ever cared about me as simply a person. I am heir princess, political asset, diplomatic prize. I am my scent deficiency and my marriage value. I am a problem to be solved or a resource to be exploited. But never just you. Yes. Marcus raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. Her skin was warm silk, and he felt her sharp intake of breath. This changes everything, she whispered. If my mother learns of Vanthros' accusations, she will demand you be sent away, or worse. Then we need to tell her ourselves. On our own terms. You do not understand. She will not listen to explanations. She will not care about context or intent. She will see only threat, a human who has somehow breached her daughter's defenses. She will act to eliminate that threat. I'm not leaving, Marcus said. Not unless you tell me to. Aethyra looked at him with something like wonder. You would risk everything? Your career, your safety, your life. For what we have built here, yes. We have only known each other for weeks. I know. You cannot possibly, he kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, a question more than a declaration. Her lips were soft and warm, tasting faintly of something sweet, like honeyed wine. For a moment, she was frozen, uncertain. Then she leaned into him, and the kiss deepened, and Marcus felt the entire universe narrow down to this single point of connection. When they finally pulled apart, Aethyra's eyes were bright. "You," she breathed, "are either the bravest human I have ever met or the most foolish. Can't I be both?" Her laugh was real this time, full and warm and startled. Then, her expression sobered. "My mother holds court tomorrow evening. If Vanthros intends to act, he will do it then, before witnesses. We must prepare." "How?" Aethyra's jaw set with determination. "You faced death for 17 days and survived. Now we face it together. And this time, we fight back." The Imperial Court was a theater of scent and light. Vast columns of luminescent crystal rose toward a ceiling painted with the history of the Dominion, victories, treaties, the long lineage of empresses stretching back millennia. The air was heavy with competing perfumes as nobles positioned themselves according to an invisible hierarchy of smell and status. Marcus stood at the back of the human delegation, his formal dress uniform stiff and uncomfortable. Ambassador Thenvarus had been furious when he'd learned of the private meetings with the princess, but political realities had forced him to include Marcus anyway. Excluding a team member on the eve of final negotiations would have signaled weakness. Empress Seelith entered to a wave of prostration. She moved like a force of nature, all cold beauty and absolute authority, her robes trailing behind her like the wake of a ship. Her scent preceded her. Marcus couldn't perceive it, but he watched the Velorians react, bowing deeper, averting their eyes. Aethyra followed 3 steps behind, as protocol demanded. She was dressed in formal court attire, her face a mask of perfect composure. She didn't look at Marcus. They'd agreed she wouldn't, not until the moment came. If it came. "We gather to conclude negotiations with the human delegation," Seelith announced, her voice carrying effortlessly through the vast hall. "Let all speak who would be heard." Lord Vanthros stepped forward immediately. "Majesty, I would be heard. Speak." The noble turned to face the assembly, his expression grave. "It has come to my attention that during these negotiations, proper protocols have been violated. One of the human attachés has been conducting private meetings with Her Highness. Meetings without guards, without witnesses, without atmospheric protection." A murmur rippled through the court. Marcus felt the weight of 100 stares turning toward him. "These meetings," Vanthros continued, "constitute a breach of diplomatic protocol at minimum. At worst, they represent a deliberate attempt to compromise our heir through some unknown human influence. I call for the immediate expulsion of the entire human delegation and a full investigation into whatever corruption has occurred." Seelith's eyes found Marcus. There was no warmth in them, no curiosity, only the cold assessment of a predator evaluating prey. "The human in question, step forward." Marcus walked through the parting crowd until he stood before the throne. He bowed in the Velorian fashion, deep, hand pressed to throat. "Majesty, you are the one who has been meeting with my daughter." "I am. And what was the purpose of these meetings?" This was the moment. Marcus drew a breath. "Princess Aethyra has been studying me. Specifically, she's been studying an anomaly in how she perceives my scent. Unlike other humans, unlike any human in your records, I do not smell like death to her." The murmur became a roar. Seelith raised one hand, and silence fell like a blade. "This is absurd," Vanthros snapped. "Humans smell the same to all Velorians. This is biological fact. The creature is lying to protect itself. Then test me," Marcus said. "Here, can. Now. Let any Velorian approach me without atmospheric filtering, and judge for themselves whether I smell the same as my colleagues." Seelith's eyes narrowed. "You would submit to such a test?" "I would." "And if we find you are lying?" "If you smell of death as all your kind do, then I'll accept whatever consequences you decree. But I'm not lying." The Empress was silent for a long moment, then she gestured. "Daughter, approach him." Aethyra descended from her position behind the throne. Her face was still composed, but Marcus could see the rapid pulse in her throat, the slight tremor in her hands. This was the risk they'd agreed to, the gamble that her mother's curiosity would outweigh her contempt. The princess stopped an arm's length away. The entire court held its breath. Then Aethyra closed her eyes and inhaled. Her face transformed. The tension drained away, replaced by something soft, something yearning. Her lips parted slightly, and she took another breath, deeper this time. "He smells like home," she said, and her voice carried through the silent hall. Like warmth and safety, like belonging. The court erupted. Nobles shouted over each other, accusations, demands, expressions of disbelief. Vanthros' face had gone pale with fury, but Marcus kept his eyes on the Empress, watching as she rose from her throne and descended the steps. Seelith stopped before him. She was close enough that he could see the fine lines around her eyes, the subtle imperfection in her otherwise flawless features. She leaned forward and inhaled. Her recoil was immediate and violent. She staggered back, hand pressed to her face, eyes watering. "Death," she gasped. "Decay. How can you—" She turned to her daughter. "How can you bear it? I do not smell what you smell, mother." Aethyra's voice was steady. "I never have. Not with him. Impossible. This is some trick, some human deception." "It is not." For the first time steel entered Aethyra's tone. "You have never believed me when I spoke of my difference. You called it deficiency, disability. You tried to cure it, then to hide it, then to leverage it in marriage contracts that would secure alliance while distancing me from court. But this," she gestured toward Marcus, "this is proof that my difference is real. And perhaps it is not deficiency at all." Seelith's face hardened. "You forget yourself, daughter." "No, Daddy. For the first time in my life, I am remembering myself." The Empress's hand moved in a sharp gesture. "Guards. Seize the human." Imperial guards surged forward. Marcus didn't resist as they grabbed his arms, forcing him to his knees. He kept his eyes on Aethyra, watching her face as she watched her mother betray her again. "This creature will be held pending investigation," Seelith declared. "The human delegation will be expelled immediately, and you," she pointed at her daughter, "you will return to your quarters and remain there until I decide what is to be done with you. Mother, that is my final word." As the guards dragged Marcus away, he saw Aethyra's composure finally crack. Tears streamed down her face, not water, but a shimmering silvery fluid that left trails like mercury on her cheeks. She reached toward him, but other guards moved to block her. "I'm sorry," he called out. "Aethyra, I'm sorry. Do not speak her name." Seelith's voice was a whipcrack. "You are nothing. You are less than nothing. And when we have dissected whatever trick allows you to deceive my daughter, you will be disposed of like the refuse you are." The last thing Marcus saw, before the doors closed, was Aethyra's face, stricken, furious, and absolutely determined. The cell was cold. That was the first thing Marcus noticed, the deliberate, biting cold that seeped through his uniform and into his bones. The Velorians had learned from their reports, it seemed. Humans weakened in cold. Humans died in cold. 17 days, he thought. I survived 17 days. I can survive this. But 17 days had been survival with a purpose. This was captivity, with no end in sight. He didn't know if the human delegation had been successfully expelled, didn't know if Earth would send rescue, or simply write him off as a diplomatic casualty. He didn't know what was happening to Aethyra. That was the worst part. Not the cold, not the uncertainty about his own fate, but the knowledge that he'd made her situation worse. She'd taken a risk for him, shown her vulnerability in front of the entire court, and now she was paying the price. Hours passed. Or days. It was impossible to tell in the windowless cell. When the door finally opened, Marcus expected guards. He expected interrogators, torturers, executioners. He didn't expect Aethyra. She slipped through the doorway like a shadow, her robes replaced by plain dark clothing. Her face was drawn, exhausted, but her eyes burned with fierce intensity. "We don't have much time," she whispered. "The guards change in 10 minutes. How did you— I know this palace better than anyone. I've spent my life finding ways to escape." She knelt beside him, producing a small blade that made quick work of his restraints. "Can you walk?" "I think so." "Then come. There's a shuttle in the secondary hangar. It's not much, but it can reach the border." Marcus grabbed her arm as she turned to leave. "Wait. Aethyra, wait. What about you? What about me? If you help me escape, your mother will— my mother will do what she always does. Punish, manipulate, control." Aethyra's voice was steady, but he could see the pain beneath the surface. "I am done letting her define my life. But your people, your position, everything you are, everything I am." She cupped his face in her warm hands, silver eyes boring into his. "Everything I am has been shaped by people who saw me as broken. Everything I have been trained for revolves around being useful to a system that considers me defective. But you—" her voice cracked. "You looked at me and saw someone worth knowing, worth defending, worth risking everything for. Aethyra, I cannot stay here, Marcus. Even if you left alone tonight, I cannot stay. I have seen now what my life could be. What I could be, with someone who sees me as whole." She kissed him, hard and desperate, and brief. "So either we leave together, or I leave alone. But I am leaving." Marcus looked at her, this proud, wounded, extraordinary woman who had somehow found home in his presence, and made his choice. Together, he said. We leave together. The shuttle was small, barely more than a transit pod, but it had a jump drive and enough fuel to reach neutral space. Aethyra piloted while Marcus watched the Velorian homeworld shrink behind them, its rings glittering like frozen rivers in the starlight. There will be pursuit, she said quietly. My mother cannot allow this defiance to stand. Then, we run. For how long? Marcus moved to stand behind her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. As long as it takes. Earth will grant us asylum, I'm certain of it. The diplomatic value of having a Velorian princess requests protection. I do not want to be a diplomatic asset. You won't be. I'll make sure of it. Aethyra leaned back against him, and he felt some of the tension drain from her frame. You cannot promise that, no, but I can promise to fight for it, for us. The jump drive hummed to life. Through the view screen, stars stretched into lines of light. Marcus attaché. Her voice was soft. When we reach your world. What happens then? Then we figure it out. Together. And Earth was chaos. News of the princess's defection spread like wildfire, through diplomatic channels. The Velorian Dominion demanded her return. Earth's government wavered, calculating costs and benefits. Marcus found himself summoned before committees, questioned by intelligence agencies, treated alternately as hero and liability. Through it all, Aethyra stayed by his side. Not because she was incapable of standing alone, she'd proven that beyond any doubt, but because she chose to. Because as she told him one evening while they watched the sunset from his family's small apartment in Toronto, humans had given her something her own people never had. A choice, she said. A true choice, free of scent politics and status games. Your people do not understand me. How could they? But they do not pretend otherwise. They simply accept. It is strange, humanity's great gift, Marcus agreed. We're excellent at accepting what we don't understand, usually because we're too busy arguing about everything else. She laughed, that full, warm laugh that still startled him every time he heard it. You are a strange species, the strangest. And yet, she turned to face him, her expression soft in the golden light. And yet you feel like home to me. All of you. This entire chaotic, contradictory, beautiful world. Marcus took her hand. That's what I was going to say to you. Were you? I've been practicing. There's a whole speech, something about finding sanctuary in unexpected places, about how the universe has a sense of humor matching people together, about the 17 days that changed what death means to me, and the 3 weeks that changed what life means. Aethyra's eyes were bright. That sounds like a very good speech. It was going to end with a question. What question? Marcus reached into his pocket and produced a small box. Inside, resting on dark velvet, was a ring, simple gold, set with a stone that shifted colors in the light, Velorian crystal, and human craftsmanship, merged into something new. Aethyra, of the Velorian Dominion. You told me once that I smell like home. The truth is, you feel like home to me too. Not because of some biological quirk or cosmic accident, but because of who you are, brave, brilliant, willing to risk everything for the chance to be truly seen. He opened the box. Will you marry me? She stared at the ring, then at him, then back at the ring. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Humans smell like death to my species, I know. My mother will never forgive this. My people will call me traitor. I know. We will face a lifetime of challenges, prejudices, incomprehensions. Yes. Aethyra took the ring from its box. She slid it onto her finger, watching the crystal catch the fading light. Then yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. Because you are brave enough to ask, because you see me as I am, and because... She leaned in to kiss him. Because you smell like home, Marcus Cole. And after a lifetime of being homeless in my own skin, I have finally found where I belong. The wedding was small by necessity. A handful of Marcus's family and friends, 2 of his former crewmates, and a few humans who had befriended Aethyra during her months on Earth. Dr. Chen stood as witness, still marveling at the biological impossibility of their union. But if the guest list was modest, the ceremony itself was extraordinary. Aethyra had insisted on incorporating elements from both cultures. Human vows spoken aloud. Velorian scent bonds symbolized through the exchange of carefully prepared perfumes that Marcus could not smell, but that Aethyra received with tears streaming down her face. This scent, she whispered, holding the vial he'd given her. How did you... I worked with Dr. Chen. She helped me synthesize something as close as possible to how I smell to you. So even when we're apart, you can... He trailed off, suddenly uncertain. Is that strange? I wasn't sure if it would work, Aethyra kissed him before he could finish. When she pulled away, her smile was incandescent. It is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me. The officiant, a friend from Marcus's colony days, now ordained for exactly this purpose, cleared his throat. If we could proceed to the vows. They faced each other, hands clasped. Around them, the small garden where they'd chosen to hold the ceremony buzzed with insects and birdsong, sounds Aethyra had come to love in her time on Earth. I, Marcus Cole, take you, Aethyra, as my partner and my home. I promise to stand beside you when your past comes calling. I promise to learn your culture even as I share mine. I promise to never stop seeing you, truly seeing you, for exactly who you are. Aethyra's voice was steady when she replied. I, Aethyra of the Velorian Dominion, take you, Marcus Cole, as my chosen and my sanctuary. In a galaxy that told me I was broken, you saw me whole. In a universe of scent and status, you offered presence and truth. I promise to face whatever comes at your side. I promise to make our house a home. I promise to breathe you in every day and remember that I am, at last, exactly where I belong. When they kissed, the small crowd cheered. Doctor? Chen dabbed at her eyes. Marcus's mother, who had been skeptical of the entire thing until she'd actually met Aethyra, was openly weeping. And somewhere in the depths of space, on a world of ice and crystal and impossible standards, Empress Seelith stared at the footage her spies had obtained and felt something crack in her chest that might have been her heart. She would not pursue them. That decision had been made weeks ago, quietly, after hours of staring at her daughter's empty chambers, and remembering a time before duty had consumed them both. Let them have this, she thought. Let them have what I could never give her. It was not forgiveness. It was not understanding. But it was a beginning. Years later, on a diplomatic mission to establish new protocols between Earth and the reformed Velorian Senate, Ambassador Marcus Cole and his wife Aethyra stood before a chamber full of representatives from a dozen species. We are often asked, Marcus said, how our union is possible. Humans and Velorians are meant to be incompatible. Our very presence should cause distress. And yet here we stand, Aethyra continued, her hand warm in his. Proof that what should be is not always what is. That biology is not destiny. That connection can be found in the most unlikely places. When we first met, Marcus said, Aethyra's people recoiled from me. I smelled like death to them, decay and ending. But, Aethyra. He smiled at her. She said I smelled like home. And he does, Aethyra confirmed. Still, after all these years. Not because I am broken, not because he is different, but because some bonds transcend biology. Some connections exist simply because they must. Because the universe, for all its vastness, sometimes conspires to bring together two souls who need each other. In the audience, human diplomats sat beside Velorian senators, their artificial scent filters allowing proximity that would once have been impossible. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was progress. It was hope. Later that night, in their quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel, Marcus held Aethyra close as they watched stars streak past the viewport. Do you ever regret it? He asked. Leaving everything you knew? Every day, she admitted. And every day, I choose it again. Because what I found is worth more than what I left. She turned in his arms, pressing her palm to his chest where his heart beat steady and strong. You are worth more. You smell like home to me too, he said. I don't know if I've ever told you that properly. Not because of scent. I can't perceive it the way you do. But when I'm with you, I feel settled. Complete. Like every hard thing I've survived was leading me to you. Aethyra's eyes shone. Marcus Cole. You sentimental human. Guilty as charged. She kissed him then, soft and slow, and the stars wheeled on around them, and somewhere in the vast dark of the universe, two species that should never have been compatible continued to find ways to reach toward each other. Because that was what hope did. It found a way. Always.